Chords and Coffee, and today we're going to talk about chord substitution. You know, I've had a few people ask me, hey Nate, how'd you know to go to that chord? Or, you know, what's your thought process on stringing different chord progressions together? And I thought we'd take a minute here just to discuss some chord substitution and that line of thinking where you're taking a standard chord progression and kind of spicing it up or jazzing it up a little bit. And one episode of Chords and Coffee is not enough to contain this subject. I mean, truly, it'd be like saying, you know, teach me how to write a song or how to create poetry or craft the great American novel or a perfect can of spaghetti. That's right, can of spaghetti. But, you know, it's just real hard to do that in one episode, right? So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to take a song that I think everybody should know, and we're going to take a very simple version of that, and then we're going to elaborate on that, and I'm going to show you my thought process on that. So without further ado, and while my coffee is a brew, and I meant to rhyme, I do it sometimes, we're going to look at Amazing Grace. Every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time, we bring you a free guitar lesson with Chords and Coffee. These videos take time and money to create, and it's our free gift to you. All that we ask in return is that you leave comments on the videos and that you subscribe to this channel. When you do that, you make a massive difference in our ability to help to continue to have Chords and Coffee online for free. Thanks for being a part of this community, and thanks for watching. Okay, so Amazing Grace in the key of G, that's the people's key, right? So first of all, before we get started on the chord substitution part of it, here's just the basic chords. So it starts off with G, Amazing Grace. The G7, and by the way, my G, I'm just going to do good old more than words G, where I've got my middle finger on the 3rd fret of the low E, index finger on the 2nd fret of the A. The D and the G string are open. My ring finger's laying on the 3rd fret of the B, pinky's on the 3rd fret of the high E. There it is, Amazing Grace. And this G7 here, this reminds me of old Dan Fogelberg, leader of the band. If you don't know that song, look it up. You're going to cry. And hopefully you want to hug your dad or somebody else who's been instrumental in helping you learn to play. Leader of the band, G7. This is going to be middle finger on the 3rd fret of the low E. Boom. Index finger on the 2nd fret of the A. Ring finger on the 3rd fret of the D. And then open G. And then pinky on the 3rd fret of the B. So Amazing Grace, how sweet. Good old-fashioned cowboy C. Index finger on the 1st fret of the B. Open G. Middle finger on the 2nd fret of the D. Ring finger on the 3rd fret of the A. And then back to G. Right, so Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like a D chord. That's going to be index finger on the 2nd fret of the G. Ring finger on the 3rd fret of the B. Middle finger on the 2nd fret of the high E. And then back to the same thing. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Here comes the E minor. Was blind. It's going to be middle finger on the 2nd fret of the A, ring finger on the 2nd fret of the D. Everything else is open to me, but now I see. Amazing Grace. That's the simple version. Why did I pick that song? Well, I think it's one that most everybody in the world knows. And then number 2, I think that's one that you ought to know if you don't. And then number 3, there's a lot of opportunity because of just the basicness of the chord progression, but more importantly, because it's already familiar to your ear. When we start jibber-jabbing with the chords, it'll be a little easier to hold on to these new harmonic ideas because the melody's so strong, right? That pentatonic melody there is so strong, it's easier to hold on to these different chords. So when we start doing chord substitutions, what's our foundational premise? The foundational premise is that in every major key, there is a sequence of chords that is the same. Now hold on just one quick second. Songs don't care about your music theory. Songs have musical law. And musical law is if it sounds good, it's good. Music theory explains all these things, right? So in a song, you know, I was watching Rick Beato the other day talking about the Beatles song Michelle and how it's a really complicated song when you start actually explaining it using theory. But at the end of the day, it just sounds good. So don't let all the theory talk all of a sudden kind of make you sort of shrivel back and shrink back from learning music, because the truth is that if it sounds good, it's good, and the theory just helps you explain why it's working, right? So every major key has a sequence of chords. The 1 chord is always going to be major. The 2 chord is always going to be minor. The 3 chord is always going to be minor. The 4 chord is going to be major. The 5 chord, it's going to be major, but I want to get back to that in just a second, because we're going to add one more note that's going to make it dominant 7, okay? The 6 chord is going to be minor, and then the 7 chord is going to be diminished. Now, when you add that 4th note, now let's take the key of G so we can get concrete with it. Here's a graphic, and Jordan, who's behind the camera, every time I say here's a graphic, I just kind of see his shoulders slump, and man, it's more work. Anyway, he's a good man. I gave him a piece of chicken today. You ought to be happy. Anyway, so you take the key of G, vroom, put it up there. These are all the chords in the key of G. You will see that I've added that 4th note, which is the 7th. So that makes the 1 chord the major 7. That makes the 2 chord a minor 7. The 3 chord a minor 7. The 4 chord a major 7. The 5 chord a dominant 7. Did a whole episode on it. The graphic looks like this. Back to this episode. The 6th chord is a minor 7. The 7th chord is a minor 7 flat 5. You could call it a half diminished, but I like minor 7 flat 5. Okay? So this formula is consistent across all the keys, all the major keys. Okay? This is the way it's spelled out. And when you start doing some basic chord substitution, this is kind of where we start. And here's what I mean. So when we're playing Amazing Grace, see that G7? That G7 right there. So a dominant 7, if this formula is consistent, and it is, then G7 belongs to the key of C. Now, in every major key, you can take the 1, the 3, and the 6, group them into one group, and then the 2, the 4, the 5, and the 7 into the other group. Tension is the group I just spoke about, 2, 4, 5, 7, and release is 1, 3, and 6. And you can substitute those chords for one another. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that you have to use your ear to decide whether or not those substitutions are working for you in your arrangement, right? And I like to use the metaphor of food, like listening is tasting. You have to kind of taste as you go, because if you don't, you end up getting something at the end that's not as good as it could have been if you just would have tasted as you go. So in this case, when I see G7, you know, I could use, if I'm seeing G7 and I'm equating that to the key of C, and that's in the tension group of chords, I could use the 2 in the key of C, that would be the D minor. I could use the 4, that would be the F major 7. There's G7's already there, and then I have the B minor 7 flat 5. That's what I'm going to use, okay? Why? Because I like the way that tastes. I like the way that sounds, right? You follow me on that? It's just spicy enough where I'm going to go. Amazing Grace. Ends up sounding like a G9 over B, but in my mind, I'm just thinking B minor 7 flat 5, right? How am I playing that? That's index finger on the 2nd fret of the A, ring finger on the 3rd fret of the D, index or middle finger on the 2nd fret of the G, pinky on the 3rd fret of the B. How sweet. So go ahead and go back to C and then to G. That little maneuver makes it feel kind of gospel-y. But here's what we're going to do here. Now, on the next line, on the first version I played, which is the most basic version, they just held G all the way to the 5 chord or the D chord at the very end. What if, instead of that G, I want to go to E minor? Remember a second ago I said the 1, the 3, and the 6. You can substitute for one another. Well, in the key of G, E is the 6th. So if I go to E minor, I can substitute that, but I don't want to just go. Maybe I want to kind of walk into it. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved. What was that little passing tone? I'm going to use D over F sharp, and that's going to be index finger on the 2nd fret of the low E. I'm going to have the A muted because the 2nd fret of the low E being held by my index finger is just going to kind of touch the A string, kind of kill it on accident. The D is ringing, and then I'm going to have my middle finger on the 2nd fret of the G, and then ring finger is going to be on the 3rd fret of the B. Sometimes my pinky jumps on there. I don't have any control of that. It just happens. So there's that. So that's there's that E minor. A wretch like me. Right? Now, why does that A7 work right there? Well, I'm going to tell you. So, in the chord substitution game, you know, we've talked about this before, but sometimes chords in music theory, there's a little bit of math in there. And one of the things that we find to be kind of true is that sometimes you can have a group of chords equal the functionality of a specific chord. Well, what do I mean? Well, like in this case, if we're talking about a 2-5 to the 1, that 2-5 is setting up that chord that we're going to. So what's happening is just for a second here, E minor is functioning as the 2 of D, A7 is functioning as the 5 of D, and this is just good old middle finger on the 2nd fret of the D, open G string, ring finger 2nd fret of the B, to a D chord. So just for a second, it's like we're shifting the tonal center, and you could equate this to key, but I like tonal center better because tonal center implies what is the greatest point of resolution. And it's we're shifting it to this D chord by doing this 2-5 to D. Now that 2 and the 5, I'm relating that to the key of D, right? And then right here, if we wanted to shift it back to G, we just, instead of making that just a good old-fashioned D major, we might go make that a D7. Now, what does that dominant 7 want to do? That dominant 7 always wants to go back to the 1. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have our, let's do like a D9 over F sharp. We're going to have our middle finger on the 2nd fret of the low E. We're going to have our ring finger on the 2nd fret of the G. Index finger is going to be on the 1st fret of the B. An open E string, an open D string, A string is muted. And then that's going to go back to or how precious is 2nd verse, that grace of thee. Same as the first one. And instead of going to A7 right here, we might go to little A minor 7. Why? Well, because that's still in the key of G. It is the 2nd in the key of G. But now what I'm doing is I'm reinforcing that 5 by, again, doing a 2-5, so an A minor to a D, back to the G. And so because I introduced that 2-5 with the E minor A7, now I'm just sort of reintroducing it back and just really solidifying that we are all up in the key of G and happy about it, right? So the A minor 7 is going to be index finger on the 2nd fret of the B, and open G. Middle finger is going to be on the 2nd fret of the D, open A. So that whole thing, how tone again, but now, right? Now, what if we wanted to add one extra layer of spice there? Well, how about this? What if on the 2nd time after we get to the da 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 da, what if instead of going back to the G, we went to D minor 7? What would that sound like? So it'd be like, let's say, a wretch like me, I once was lost, but now. How in the world does that work? Okay, so again, G7. G7 belongs to what key? That's right, it's the 5 in C. Every time I do something like that, I feel like I'm on Sesame Street, and honestly, I'm here for it. But anyway, yes, G7 belongs to the key of C. In C, the 5 is G. The 2, remember, the 2, the 4, the 5, and the 7, you can kind of use to substitute for one another. So that D minor 7, I'm thinking of that, that's the 2 of C, and so I'm thinking of that as an option for substitution. Furthermore, remember just a second ago when we did that 2-5, that sort of expanded form? 2-5-1. It's kind of the building blocks of jazz as much as 1-4-5 is sort of the building blocks of blues, okay? And so when you do a 2-5 into a 1 chord, it's just sort of like expanding outward and getting to that one chord. And in this case, we're shifting the tonal center to the C, which is that 4 chord that's coming up. And I know it's a lot of music theory flying at you, but just know that the D minor 7 has been substituted for the G7, but from that D minor 7, we're going to a G dominant 7 type chord. In fact, I chose a G13, and I'll show you why. So D minor 7 first, index finger on the 5th fret of the A all the way across to the high E. I have my middle finger on the 6th fret of the B, and then ring finger is going to be on the 7th fret of the D to G13. That's going to be index finger on the 3rd fret of the low E, middle finger is going to be on the 3rd fret. I'm going to skip the A, middle finger is going to be on the 3rd fret of the D, ring finger on the 4th fret of the G, pinky on the 5th fret of the B, and then this C major 7. Now you can do this guy here, which is just index finger straight across the 3rd fret. You know this one. Ring finger is going to be on the 5th fret of the D, middle finger is going to be on the 4th fret of the G, pinky is going to be on the 5th fret of the B. Or, since we're already on this G13, go back to that. Check this out. What if we went like this? That's worth a swig of coffee right there. Just one second. Ooh, I made a big mess of coffee today. When you finally make that pilgrimage to Palen music, say, show me the coffee stained table. I'm here to see it. It's a relic. Anyway, this is a really cool voicing. This is going to be a middle finger on the 3rd fret of the A, index finger on the 2nd fret of the D, and your ring finger and your pinky are right where they were on that G13, but now you're making this C major 7, so you're really only moving 2 notes, but ring finger's going to be on the 4th fret of the G, pinky's going to be on the 5th fret of the B. That's nice. So you got, so I once was lost, but now, and we've moved the tonal center to the C major 7 because of this 2-5 D minor 7 to G13 into C major 7. And now we're going to go, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Ooh, minor 4. What's minor 4 all about? Minor 4 to me, like, you know, that's the Beatles thing where they go, that kind of deal, right? And they got it from, you know, they weren't the ones that made that up, but they certainly use that a lot in pop music, and many others followed suit. That minor 4, to me, really wants to kind of pull back to that G, and we did an episode on a minor 4 that I'll show a graphic of that right now. And if you want to discover why that pull back to that 1 chord is so strong, watch that episode. But in the meantime, let's do that minor 4 like this. I love this minor 6 voicing for C minor 6. This is going to be ring finger on the 3rd fret of the A, index finger is going to be on the D string, making a little bar across the D, the G, and the B. But then your middle finger, index finger, not ring finger. Index finger is going to be on the 1st fret of the D, the G, and the B. And then middle finger is going to be on the 2nd fret of the G with the ring finger on the 3rd fret of the A. So I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. So after that C minor 6, let's do a G over B. You know, kind of the landslide G over B. That's going to be index finger on the 2nd fret of the A, not playing the low E at all. Open D, open G, ring finger on the 3rd fret of the B, pinky on the 3rd fret of the high E. Back to that A minor 7. And you could do D or G right there, or one more layer of spice. After that A minor 7, D sharp, diminished 7. Where's that coming from? That's kind of a substitution for B7 into this E minor, right? It's a leading tone into that. That's going to be middle finger on the 6th fret of the A, ring finger on the 7th fret of the D string, index finger is going to be on the G string of the 5th fret, pinky's going to be on the 7th fret of the B, and then E minor 7, index finger laying straight across from the A to the high E, middle finger, that's going to be on the 7th fret, A to the high E, and then middle finger on the 8th fret of the B, and then ring finger on the 9th fret of the D. Low E is open. And I'm thinking of this in my head as a E minor over D for this next chord. But it's like this G, I don't know, sus2 over D because of what I'm actually playing here. So that's going to be index finger on the 5th fret and just layer straight across from the A all the way across to the high E, and then take your ring finger and put that on the 7th fret of the G, pinky on the 8th fret of the B, and then C sharp minor 7 flat 5. Well, where in the world did you get that, Nate? A C sharp minor 7 flat 5. It's just an E minor with C sharp in the bass. It's also the 7th of D. Here we are again, this whole sequence here. This is all kind of borrowed from D major, okay? Because you've got that E minor to this E minor over D, G sus2, or add 9, however you want to think about it, over D to this C sharp minor 7. That's going to be index finger on the 4th fret of the A, ring finger on the 5th fret of the D, middle finger on the 4th fret of the G, and then pinky on the 5th fret of the B. Let's just do a good old A minor, maybe a D9, which is going to be middle finger on the A string, skipping the low E, A string, 5th fret, index finger, 4th fret of the D, lay that ring finger across the D, the G, the B, or you can do just ring and pinky on the 5th fret of the B and the G. And then if you want one more little saucy variant, instead of playing home on that note there, you can go to F, add 9. Well, what is that? That's just an F chord with a little pinky, little G and the melody up there. It's sort of a little wing. That chord right there. It's going to be index finger on the 1st fret of the B, middle finger on the 2nd fret of the G, ring finger on the 3rd fret of the D, pinky on the high E, and then a C. Same thing, C add 9, Wonderwall C. It's going to be middle finger on the A string, 3rd fret, index finger, D string, 2nd fret, open G, and then ring finger, 3rd fret of the B, pinky, 3rd fret of the high E, then back to that G. Well, Nate, that was a mess load of chords. It was. It was. I ain't sorry about it, and I'll tell you why. Here's the deal, is that when it comes to chord substitution and it comes to getting that involved in what you're playing, I think one of the ways you should do it is print off a copy of a song you like, make a chord chart that you like, and then start finding chords that you can substitute. Look for the 7s, look for the minors, look and just start playing around with them. Every single key, because it has this sequence of chords, there's 2 major 7 chords, there's 3 minor chords, there's 1 dominant 7 chord and 1 minor 7 flat 5. Well, because there's 3 minor chords, just take A minor for example. A minor, it's going to be the 2nd in G, right? It's going to be the 3rd in F, right? And then it's going to be the 6th in C. So right there, if you see an A minor, I just gave you 3 chords that are 3 keys that you can go find where the substitutions are for. And remember, the 2nd, the 4th, the 5th, and the 7th kind of belong together. And then the 3rd, the 1st, and the 6th belong together. This is the kind of episode I'm hoping raises lots of questions where you're like, well, wait a minute, what about this? What about this? That's good conversation. And good conversation is how you build community. My friends, we do this every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Central. Thank you for being on the live chat. Thank you for participating in the comments section. Your comments keep this thing going, as well as when you hit the subscribe button and you share. Thank you for the privilege of your time. And if I can help you do one thing, it's to live life the best you can with the guitar in your hand. We'll see you next week for another Chords and Coffee.